Thank you everybody for being here. Happy Friday. I'd like to really welcome Dr. Rahm to Ask the Patent Professor. And today's episode is really Ask Dr. Rahm because it's a privilege to have somebody of her caliber here. She's an inventor, a serial inventor, multiple patents, has been doing this for a long time. So Dr. Rahm, welcome to the Ask the Patent Professor show.
Thank you. I've heard a lot about you from my friend Lisa, so it's nice to be on the call.
Yeah, of course. Lisa said a lot of great things, and we're always looking for inspiring inventors to have on here to talk about their journey. So we're happy to have you here. I understand you do a lot of travel, and understand you just got back from an international trip. So I really appreciate you taking the time to still join us today.
Thank you. No, it's great to be here. I'm used to the travel, so it's fine.
Okay, so let us start. Just tell us a little bit about yourself before becoming an inventor. Like most inventors have normal day jobs first, and then things change for them. So give us a little bit of background.
So I had a master's of science and then a doctorate degree in counseling psychology. And then I ended up going back to school in nanobiotechnology, bioscience engineering, nutrition, and pharmaceutical management. I've actually stayed in college my whole life, which it's interesting. At Harvard and Cornell, I took a lot of classes in patent work. In their Harvard extension classes, I had a graduate certification in nanobiotechnology. So they actually taught us also the patent laws. We had lawyers and different people. And then at Cornell with pharmaceutical operations management, they did the same thing. And it was interesting. I used to work for a company called Alexion Pharmaceuticals, Biogen IDEC, Bristol Myers Squibb, a bunch of companies on the medical clinical side, research side. And we also had experience there. You know, it's very different when you do patents in the pharmaceutical space. And it was interesting in my classes on patents at Harvard and Cornell, they actually brought up Alexion and Biogen IDEC and how they did their patents. Alexion actually, with one of the molecules became, went down in history to this date as doing a launch of a product and making the most money off of basically that product. And of course, they use the different patent laws. You're much more familiar with it than I am, where when you do a molecule, a lot of times there'll be up to 100 patents around one molecule, right? And then also you have to go back and fight different companies. So I was familiar with patents because of all the work I did in the pharmaceutical biotech space for NIMH as a research director at one point when I was younger. I also was basically affiliated with learning about patents there. But it wasn't until I became a CEO of a healthcare company that I filed different things around databases when I really didn't even understand databases, but I started understanding that maybe it was good to take some of the trade secrets and make patents. And then when I decided to do my own formulas in the environmental, human health, and animal health space, I was guided to do these patents, but it's been a lengthy process. It was something much more complicated than I thought it was going to be honest. But my background, even though I was exposed to it along the way, it still was a process that I was not familiar with until I actually embarked upon it myself. Because, it's one thing sitting in a company and hearing the lawyers talk about it. And it's another thing when you're the inventor and actually file the patents with lawyers on your own, without having a huge billion-dollar company behind you.
Right. So your first exposure to patents, of course, other than in college, and you're very lucky, in fact, to have the programs at Harvard and Cornell that talked about it, because that's extremely unusual. Even patent law, even lawyers that specialize in patent law, there's maybe at most in law school one course on patent law, and it's a specialty all of its own. And the rest is really learned through years and years of practicing as a patent lawyer. I had one course on patents, and that was it. And that's not unusual at all. That's still the case at most law schools. No matter what area of law you practice, everyone takes criminal law, torts, constitutional law, and pretty much everything else except patent law which is what for the last 25 years what I've specialized in. So you're lucky to have that background, but your first exposure to patents was not as the inventor. So you were at, when you said, so were you at a $1 billion company and it was patents?
Well, when I was at Biogen, IDEC, and Alexion, because I was on the research medical side, I started my career in the pharmaceutical space, actually in marketing and sales, but quickly they moved me to medical marketing and stuff like that because of my educational background. And then they kind of made me go over to the medical clinical research side. But I was exposed to some conversations in corporate meetings, even going back to my late 20s at Pfizer, where they would explain the different products, whether it was Viagra or Lipitor and what was filed. But it was very brief classes. And then the more I moved up in some of these companies, the more I was exposed to the lawyers and the conversations, because when you file for an indication with the FDA and you have patents, you can change those and go after another indication, right? When you file for the FDA. So let's say you file for a molecule that helps with a brain tumor. You can actually go back and file differently in a different area. So we were exposed to that. But when I tell you I was exposed to it, but I was still very ignorant to it, when they talked to us about it, one of the reasons they would talk to me is I would do investigator-sponsored trials where we would go into different areas with the molecule. Because I went from sales, marketing, business to insurance to really focusing on the science, research, medical side. So they explain, find all these different things from the case studies or the investigator-sponsored trials that would make this patent different. I was exposed to it that way. But again, you had like 21 attorneys. You had teams of people. I don't know how much Biogen, IDEC, and Alexion made a year, but it was a lot of money. Huge, top 5 biotech pharma companies in the world. And so I was exposed to it. But again, I'm just being really honest with you. Even though I was exposed to it, I still really didn't understand it. Like for me, as I would say a layperson, I'm not an attorney. This has been a long process and an expensive process for me. Because, it's one thing when it's someone else's money and you're helping on a team of 100 people, right? It's another thing when you're an entrepreneur and you're on your own and you're filing patents before you've been successful with that formula or with whatever device you've developed. So I even though I was exposed to it, I'm just being very honest with you, I still felt completely uneducated. I would Google things, look into them, and still, in my mind, I was just determined to use some of the knowledge that I had learned. And I'll just say this, for example, when I was in the graduate program at Harvard in nanobiotechnology, at the end of each class, we had to develop a molecule or a device or something innovative that no one else had done. And I kind of understood at that point, because of working in the pharmaceutical biotech industry, I understood that if I'm giving this information in a class assignment to get a grade, and of course I wanted an A, then like for example, one time I was working on a how do you develop a vaccine, right? With larvae, are you using the E. coli? Are you using the mammalian? What cell line are you using? And I had to develop all of that on my own. And my thought process at that time was, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to go ahead and file the patents now, because if I don't, someone else is going to file what I just presented, because I had to present it to the class. If I was in my 20s, I wouldn't have even thought about doing that. And I'm still, if you ask me, was that the right decision? I don't know, because once you file those patents, it takes money to defend them. And I didn't even know that. I didn't know that. Like, you're the expert. I'm on this call with you. I'd love to ask questions because it's such a lengthy process. Like, I filed a patent in 2015 as the inventor, and it wasn't even approved until this summer. And so, yeah, it was a much different process than I was ever. I wish I could come on your show and say I'm an expert at it, but I'm not.
No, but what, and we're not looking at you as a subject matter expert, but a lot of inventors face, and it might be in a different scale, but the same kind of obstacles, the uphill battle with their patent. And in that sense, it doesn't matter how many patents you have. Every inventor has those gnawing self-doubt and concerns, like, am I throwing good money after bad? Like, should I should I just give up on this? Because, you've had rejections from the patent office, and I've been practicing 25 years, and every rejection, at first glance, it's scary because you read it and it looks like, oh my God, they found the patent that I was working on. They found my idea already exists.
Exactly. That's what happened to me. I was like, wait a minute. And I did not know when I filed a patent, I listed like anyone I had ever met, anything I'd ever read. I put it in the first body of the letter. The attorney never told me not to. And then later that company, even though I listed that knowledge that I had, I mean, came back and filed something against me saying that I had plagiarized it. Now or learned from someone else. I don't know how they worded it. But it ended up where the patent office, regardless, approved my patents. But it made me feel like I was on a court stand and needed to defend. They even said stuff about my education. Like, I'm like, wait a minute, I didn't even think I had to have a certain education to file a patent. And I actually have been in school for 21 years, but it was really odd. I felt like I was being on the stand of your line or plagiarizing. So I hated that feeling.
Yeah, and those office actions, it's basically an examiner from the patent office, and you know this, but for the benefit of the viewers, the examiners believe what they found is, they call it prior art, a patent that shows that the inventor's idea is not new. And it's scary for inventors when they receive that office action if they haven't been through the process before, but it doesn't matter how many times you've been through it. I think it's still it's like a kick in the gut, because even if you do patent searches, there's rarely an exact match between the references found in your lawyer's patent search and what the examiners find. A lot of times they're close, but sometimes there are new references that an inventor hasn't seen. So that's also scary, because you think, oh my God, they found the smoking gun, and how come I didn't see this before? And it's easy to go into a panic.
Yeah, that's why sometimes I'm like, is it better to have a trade secret or to do patents? And then another thing that I was not, because I filed 10 patents after that, right? That I'm still waiting on. And I'm not an attorney, so I don't know what'll happen with those, but I'm expecting that I'll have to defend those as well. But it's amazing to me how long it takes. Like, I'm just shocked about the whole process. And maybe there's something I don't know that it can be faster. I'm not sure.
Well, I'll tell you this, 2015 to 2022 is incredibly long. So I wouldn't expect, I mean, that's the longest I've ever heard of. So I wouldn't expect all the other 10 to take that long. Typically, it's still a long time, but you're looking at 2 to 3 years. So 2015 to now is 7 years, which is an incredible delay. The good thing is there's a patent term readjustment that you're entitled to. So patents are good for 20 years after filing. But if it takes 7 years to get your patent, in a way, it's not fair, right? Because your 20 years is now reduced and you only have 13 years left. However, patent term readjustment means that as long as the delay is not due to the inventor, you can recapture some of that lost time and still get a longer monopoly than what you have. So I don't know if you remember, if you were able to get that, and we can talk about that separately, but you should certainly have more than a 13-year patent life left, because the patent office took 7 years to grant your application.
Well, I'd love to talk to you about it, because one of the things is some of the formulas that I worked on in 2015, I actually then went back to school, and so I learned different techniques. So then I I filed different patents kind of in the same space in some of the areas. Some of them were completely new, like I did something for Alzheimer's, and I did a super skin coating. I did different things that were my projects at Harvard and Cornell as well. But I'm in 70 countries as a scientist that developed formulas in the environmental space and in the human health space, and launched the animal space in February during Fashion Week, and the clothing space. And the issue is I've never filed international patents. So I probably shouldn't even say that publicly, but my next move, and the company that I work with right now, what they want me to do is to file international patents. And to be candid with you, I sit here and I'm like, great, who's going to try to sue me? in another country, or who's going to try to, how much is that going to cost me? That's my issue. It's just like this whole big world that unless you're a patent attorney, and I really believe that's, like you said, a very specialized occupation. To be candid with you, it's been hard for me to find people that are patent attorneys that can help me. It's a lot. I just, there's not like a guidebook, or unless I haven't found one, and maybe you've written one that would help me more with things. It's hard, and I'm sure you know this, when you are working in a company where you've commercialized things. I
Right.
traveled over 200 days last year internationally, and I'm working with governments, I'm working with corporations, I'm working with people. It's hard to juggle that, and then all of a sudden you're supposed to be an expert in patent law, because it's kind of funny. People will ask me questions, and I'm like, I have no idea. Like the company, the CEO of our company will ask me questions too, because the way it works is I'm licensing the formulas I do to them. They ask me questions, and I really, because I'm not the expert. Another thing, I don't mean to like go on and binge about this, but I also always want to do things right when I file the patents. I don't ever want to do something that's misleading or that's doing something infringing on anyone else. I know there's certain people that will take other people's patents and then file them. That's never been my goal. My goal is to create solutions that can make the world a better place. I'm really a specialist in detoxification of the land, air, water, and people, and helping really get rid of things like viruses, parasites, fungus, bacteria, nuclear waste, heavy metals from land, air, and water, things like that. So I don't ever want to steal anyone's technology, because I also think there's things I've done as a scientist that other people are using and infringing on. And so I never want to do that to anyone else. So it really is this kind of, you need an expert, I think, working with you in this space, because I definitely am not one as it pertains to this, even though I've been fortunate enough to have patents approved.
So I think what happens a lot of times is, especially when an inventor ends up filing continuation applications, right? That's probably the terminology for that. Sometimes it's called a CIP application. So you use some of the subject matter from the earlier application. And what ends up happening very quickly is you can get a lot of allowances if the original application has patentable subject matter. So especially with the number of patents you have, I'm not surprised you're getting questions on patenting, because people just assume like, oh my God, like look how many patents she has. But there's so much to it, especially if you haven't filed internationally. Then you're talking about the laws of however number of countries you're interested in. There is no way any one person or even a law firm can have that kind of expertise. So most patent lawyers, like our firm, we have associates throughout the world or experts in their local laws, and we've developed relationships with them. But the beauty from an inventor standpoint is once you file your initial patent application, it kind of freezes your rights internationally for a year. So you don't, for any viewers that are worried about protecting overseas their idea, if as long as you protect it and file in the United States, you have a 1 year grace period to decide on international applications. I don't know if any of your applications were patent cooperation treaty applications. Does that sound familiar? It's also called a PCT. So that there's a way that you can file international protection in multiple countries simultaneously with an application called a PCT application. So it's like one application. It substantially reduces the costs for inventors, so they don't have to file in 10, 20, 30 countries at once, because most small inventors just can't afford to do that.
I would love to talk to you about that. I'd love to get that information. I'm not familiar with it. I didn't even know about that, to be honest. The company that is launching some of my formulas that I've done patents on launched the month COVID hit. And so and grew so fast. It went from one country to 70 over 2.5 years. And the formulas are all mine. And most of those formulas are around the new patents that I filed about a year ago. And so I'd love to speak with someone about that, because that's really what I need to do, because the products are being sold in so many countries, from countries in the Middle East to Asian countries to countries over in Europe. So.
Okay, so one thing that I'd have to say about the subject matter of your patents is they're extremely complex, like for the most part, at least even for me as a patent attorney. So can you explain them in maybe in simple terms? What are some of your patents that have really changed the industry, and where are they being used now? Where are they being commercialized, so that people can get a better understanding of what you're doing?
Well, I feel so the technology that's been approved in the United States through patents, there was 168 claims, I think, that got approved. I'm not using a lot of that technology right now because I ended up not liking how I did those patents and wanted to make something better, and just to be honest with you. So I filed new patents around the technology, which are 10 patents that are very complicated as well. They're all around biotechnology. The first series of patents are around the creation of basically using a zeolite product, where I was able to make a silicon dioxide out of different kinds of fracking, polarization. I use lots of heating and cooling methods during the utility process. But the purpose was to create this cage-like structure that could go in and rip apart heavy metals, nuclear waste, different types of viruses, bacteria, help with tumor suppression, help with aging. So I think like some of the claims that got approved were the regeneration of the hair, nails, and skin. And I did another patent around that initial one that's used the technology that I actually used for the current formulas that are out there. So those patents are very important to me, the 10 that I filed, because most of that knowledge is being used and is commercialized, but I also have trade secrets around it. So here's what I did. I did the patents around each of the formulas I've created, but I also did trade secrets so that no one had the exact method of what I did. And those products have all been commercialized. Yeah, most of them are in 60, 70 countries at this point. I also have a skin coating I created to help with the skin, to protect it from EFTs and 5G and nuclear waste, environmental toxins, pollutions, viruses, bacteria. That will be launched during Fashion Week. I actually have a skin, it's called Super Skin Coating, and that it's a spray that will help the skin be protected. And then I have a clothing line that I did a patent around that helps with the same thing, that you can actually wash, but then spray a solution on it, which attaches to the silver and gold ions in the clothing, and helps with, again, protecting the body in case of heavy metals, pollution, etc. Because the problem is our environment is heavily toxic. A lot of people don't know that that's one of the issues with all the different viruses that are happening, because that's the space that I've worked in my whole life. I understand that if you can create barricades to these things like viruses, parasites, or nuclear waste, you can help the body protect itself. So I have a lot of patents around that whole philosophy. I worked with Bristol Myers Squibb on HIV and Hep C as a scientist. I understand the different ways that we need to protect ourselves. So those are a lot of the patent technology. And then another thing that I really focused on is, people don't know this, but vitamins that you take, different supplements you take, a lot of times they have heavy metals in them. So even though, like, let's say you're taking vitamin C, and we know that vitamin C actually can help regenerate the body as well as soil, for example. A lot of people don't know that. In 2007, they came out with the information that can actually help the soil, not just detox, but also it can supplement the soil so it works better, and so that seeds grow faster, etc., which is much better than using a GMO. Because if you look at my technology, I'm using nanotechnology in the utility process, not in the natural products. I'm still keeping I'm still using vegan, gluten-free, organic substances. And I even test the GMOs of the plants and then their parent plants. But I also detox the heavy metals out of everything that I make. A lot of times you'll go to the store and you may buy a $50 bottle of vitamin C or multivitamins, but they haven't done that. So a lot of my patents are around that technology as well. And I kind of took the approach that I learned from pharma, in the supplement space. They're not used to working at pharma. I'm one of the few scientists that actually transitioned from that space, pharmaceutical to nutraceutical. So I'm applying the same strategy to the formulas that I work on, trade secrets and various patents. And then finally, when I do patents, just so you know, if I do a nutraceutical patent, I also do a pharmaceutical and biotech patent because I also have a pharmaceutical company. So I'm trying to set the stage so that we can work with certain types of cancer and other things. But again, I think my weakness is not knowing 100% if I filed everything the right way. If you look at my career, I left biotech and pharma in 2000 and end of 2009. And I was a CEO of healthcare companies in the United States. And then I became more like an entrepreneur, really doing different companies. The last 2.5 to 3 years, at first I didn't have the money to really learn more about patents and hire the right firms. Now I do. I have the ability because if you look at once you commercialize a patent, then you see the value of it, right? So let's say someone sues you on the patent that you just made, and I'm just using, a certain number, not what I've made, but if you made 60 million that year, then that's okay. But in the beginning, when you don't have that money, that's when it's really scary.
So this is also fascinating. Dr. Rambo, definitely have to have you come back because of timing to talk some more, especially since it's not until some of the patents start becoming commercialized and you get a return on your investment that inventors really double down hard on patenting. But I want to end with just one question for our viewers. If you had like one piece of advice for an inventor that's new to inventing and new to patenting, something that you wish you would have known years ago when you started, what would that piece of advice be?
I think a piece of advice that no one told me that I wish I would have known is that you didn't fail just because they come back to you to examine your patent and they show you something else that's similar to your patent. I was like so upset when that happened the first time and literally devastated for a month. I mean, I was like, wait a minute, what do you mean that they're challenging the patent? No one prepared me for that at all, or for the cost of that. And I think that if you can plan if you just know that and can plan accordingly, it's kind of like saying if you're going to play, volleyball, are you going to win every game? No, you're going to have to fail a little bit and then keep learning, and then you win. As a researcher, I was very familiar with that. 90% of the things that I create or work on fail. But I wish I would have known that about the patent process. So I think even with my school and everything, no one told me that. So I think people really need to know that and be prepared and not feel bad about it.
Yeah, that is just such phenomenal advice. I've been doing these interviews now for like almost 3 years, and I wish, this is phenomenal advice for a lot of inventors. And it's a good thing in a way that when you get a rejection from the patent office, you have 3 months to respond typically, and you can buy extensions of time and get up to 6 months to respond. And I don't know all the policy reasons behind that, but certainly an inventor is given time to recover from that initial shock of a rejection. So you have time to get over that, dig in, look at the details, and then work with your attorney to overcome the rejection. But phenomenal advice of not any of our viewers out there, if you get an office action, you get a rejection, it's not the end of the line. It's really an invitation from the patent office to help distinguish your idea from the stuff that they found. And then again, thank you, Dr. Rahm. Amazing to have you here on our show. We are absolutely gonna get back to you and have you come back, because I don't think the time we have does your knowledge justice or the inspiration that you bring to inventors justice. So thank you, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you so much. I
Okay.
appreciate it.
Happy Friday, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend.